So this data sheet is showing the new motor vehicle sales descriptive statistics from 2015 to the end of 2019. And we're going to create summary statistics for each of these variables to show measures of center and measures of spread. I'm going to start with the Quebec domestic car sales. So to create a summary table, you want to record your summary statistics over the side of the table, not below the table, because if you're trying to create some graphs later on, you don't want any extra data at the bottom of your variables. So you always want to make sure we place that to the side. So I've already created a header over here to indicate that I'm making this summary statistic table. And I've started with the first variable, the Quebec domestic car sales. So I want to enter a formula. So underneath that header for that variable, to enter a formula, you press the equal sign. And then from there, you need to put in a formula. There are several built-in formulas. So we want to get the mean. It's actually typed in as average. Okay, so the mean is average. You write equals average, and then you open up a bracket to say what you want to take the average of. So there's two ways that you can enter the cell range. You can either highlight the data in that column, or you can type it in. So I'm going to actually go ahead and highlight the data. So I'm going to go back over to where that variable is and just simply click and drag to highlight all of that data right down to the bottom. If you have a very long column, again, you may want to just type in that cell range, but you would again need to know where it begins and where does it end. Okay, so you should be able to see the formula entered with the cell range. So that variable was in column D. It started at D2, and then it went down to row D62. So to get that formula to appear to show the average, you need to put a bracket at the end and then just press enter. Okay, so there it is. And under where it says summary statistics, we want to indicate what we just calculated. So that was the mean. And we're going to continue to do some more calculations. We're going to look at median, mode, and also standard deviation, minimum, maximum, and the range. Okay, so to calculate the median, go to the cell beside median underneath our first variable for Quebec domestic car sales, and just put in another equal sign to indicate that we are entering a formula. And we're going to type in the word median to calculate the median. And we're going to enter the cell range. So again, we could go back and highlight the data in that column, or we can type in the cell range. I remember what the cell range was from my previous calculation for the mean, was going from D2, okay, 2, so use a colon for 2. It was going from D2 to D62, and then close the bracket, and it's calculated the median for us. Okay, so for mode, so equals mode, cell range, D2, colon, D62. Okay, and there wasn't a mode, so it says not applicable. Standard deviation, so equals standard STDEV. You'll notice that a bunch of them come up. So we've got STDDEV, that's for standard deviation. Okay, but then we've got down here STDEV, standard deviation of an entire population, STDDEV.S, standard deviation, that would be for a sample. Okay, so if you have quite a bit of data, I mean, here I'm looking at the entire set of data for, a set time frame, but still consider that a population. So when I'm going to speak about this data, I'm always going to refer to that time frame and just making some inferences about that particular time frame. Doesn't necessarily mean that we would see the same sort of trends happening going forward, but it may very well likely be that that does happen. So I think it would be justified in using population here. Okay, so choosing that one and then placing the cell range in. Okay, and then we have minimum. Because you don't have to type in the whole word minimum, you just type in MIN, and then the cell range. And same thing for maximum. You don't type in the whole word, it's just max. So equals max with the cell range. Okay. And then range, another measure of spread, doesn't actually have a formula, but remember that range is just the difference between the maximum and the minimum. So I'll use the maximum and the minimum to come up with the range. So I'm just going to press equals, and then I'm going to click on the cell for the maximum. So V7 comes up because it's in column V and it's in the 7th row. And then minus, and then click on the minimum cell. So minus V6, that's the cell above V7. So that's the maximum minus the minimum. Press enter for it to accept the formula. And we have all of our summary statistics calculated for our first variable. Okay, so now I want to repeat this process for all of the other variables. So rather than typing out all of these headers, I'm just going to copy and paste the variable names from the beginning of the spreadsheet. Okay, so just selecting all of these variable names. Control C, okay, and then going over to where I want that to paste, Control V. Okay, so there's all of the headers there. And I don't need to retype all of these formulas for each of these variables. I can just fill across. So if I select all of the data, all of the calculations that were made for the first variable, and I can see this little blue square here. If I put my cursor towards it, it changes to what we call a crosshair. This looks like a plus sign. So when you do that, you can click and drag across. And that's going to fill in all of the calculations for each of the other variables. Okay, so last thing I want to do with this summary statistic table is just to add some borders to it to create table rows and columns. Okay, so I'm just going to select all borders after I've selected all of the data. And I'm actually going to cut this data from this sheet and put it into its own sheet. Okay, so I'm going to add a sheet, okay, and then just paste that data. Okay, and also want to change the name of this sheet. Okay, so just click on the sheet name and I'm going to rename it Summary Statistics.